Why do people think of you as a recluse?
I think for various reasons. I stopped going on the road. I didn't actually drop out of the music scene, but I stopped going on the road in about 1974. Although I worked on lots of projects through the 70s, none of them really had much success. A few of them were fairly obscure. I wanted to try and do something aside from being on the road for a while. I've been on the road for 12 or 13 years, and I thought, well, I just want to try and see if there's something else I can do. I like, I love playing and I love music, but I thought surely there must be some other kind of existence that I could explore a bit, and also the fact I didn't live in London. I didn't go to the clubs where rock and roll stars go, or I didn't kind of particularly behave like a rock and roll star, and because I didn't do as much talking to the British press as they would have liked, I suppose is another reason for it. They said, well, he's not going to talk to us, then he must be a recluse. Actually, I found that being on the road for so long gave me a kind of false reality that you can live in some kind of never land, some kind of cloud cuckoo land. You're completely removed from any realities. You can often talk to people who have always been on rock and roll tours, and there's some things they can't do, like they can't book their own plane tickets, or they can't do something with a bank account, or they can't get from point A to point B unless there's a car or some a roadie, and all those kind of things, which, I mean, however trivial, are things which, for me anyway, gave me a new view of life as a whole. I suddenly realised, well, there's actually more to life than being cocooned in a rock and roll touring world.
When you were growing up in that whole scene and you were obviously around other rock musicians, whether it was Eric Clapton or Townsend or whoever, the people in Traffic and so
Yeah.
forth, did you hang out with them and
Yeah.
live the life of a rock star?
I suppose to a certain extent, but also you must remember that in those days, to a certain extent, success was measured by how much work you were doing. I mean, and so it was really a kind of continuous existence of working and traveling, which isn't a very glamorous side of life anyway. And so whilst I did hang out and know these people, yes, certainly. I mean, it wasn't that would be more, let's say, the exception than the rule. I mean, it wasn't. It was kind of occasionally rather than continuously.
Well, obviously you're a bit younger than a lot of them, but why is it, do you think, that you look much better than a lot of them do?
Oh, Lise, that's very nice of you to say so. I hope I don't
No, but you do.
look
I
like
mean, you
I
look
feel.
healthier.
No, well, that I don't know. I owe it all to cosmetic surgery.
Why do you think people started to call you Stevie as opposed to Steve, which is your name? Is your name Steve or Steven?
Stephen with a PH
Ah.
is actually.
Well, then
is,
how
is
did
the
it get to
name.
be Steve with a V?
Well, I don't know. I suppose it tends to be a bit of a mouthful. I mean, anything more than 4 syllables these days, is a bit. I suppose in a way Stevie Winwood rolls off the tongue maybe a bit easier, but the trouble I find is people have, with a slight slip of the tongue, I suddenly become Stevie Wonder, which is something I want to try and avoid if possible. So I think Steve is maybe it helps to avoid the problem.
Well, do you think it started because of that little Stevie bit because you were so young when you were with the Spencer Davis group?
Yeah, I'm certain. That's a possibility, strong possibility.
When did you realize that you had the voice that you have?
Well, early days of Spencer Davis Group, I suppose. Really, what happened is the Spencer Davis Group started really trying to imitate American blues and R&B, and that's really what I started doing, was to try and imitate black American singers. When I left Spencer Davis Group and formed Traffic, I was really intent on not getting stuck into R&B, but also to incorporate various other forms of of country music and rock and roll, folk music, classical music, jazz, all these different kind of things, in order to make something that was probably not a copy of something American, but more kind of personal style, something different that had its own kind of style. You know, it's a very conscious effort that we made in Traffic to achieve that.
With Traffic, did you do what you set out to do?
Yeah, yeah, we did combine, different forms and change from an R&B band into a group that's kind of more eclectic. Was drew on various different kinds of music and created our own kind of sound out of our own kind of music. Yes, I think so.
Were you aware at the time with Traffic that it was going to be as influential a group as I think it became?
Yeah, well, I mean, we felt, very definitely that we were doing the right thing.
You felt you were on to something,
We felt
right?
we were
Yeah.
onto something,
Right.
exactly.
Do you feel you have a great voice?
Um, well, in a word, no, because I feel that possibly for some things, yeah, but there's a difference between, let's say, being a great singer and having a great voice. I mean, it's not very healthy to think of yourself as being too great at anything, because sooner or later, you're gonna get brought down to earth. So I'm gonna burst the balloon. But yes, I mean, I'm aware that of certain qualities.
Who do you think has a great voice? I mean, if you were to go
Well,
around saying.
Well, I
people
mean,
who-
Van Morrison, who I think is a great singer, Ray Charles, and of course, people like Little Richard. Also like people like George Jones, who also has a great voice as well.
Is this a
And,
recent interest in this country music?
Not really. I always used to love and listen to those early Jerry Lee country things. I used to love those things.
Do you feel that you just don't want to work with other musicians?
Uh,
I mean, be honest.
well, yeah. Well, no, it's not that simple. Really, I don't think. I mean, it's just I feel that there's a certain difference, and that it has certain possibilities, that way of working, to do something that would be very different than if I made an album in a conventional way with musicians and did it all together, and producers and so on. And it's just an alternative way of working, which suited me particularly at the time, for various reasons. What are the reasons? Yeah. Well, I had a lot of problems with the first album I had, which wasn't a success, and I built this studio, so it seemed like the facilities were right, and messing around with tape machines, overdubbing, had always been something that I'd been interested in and vaguely dabbled in. So I decided I'd do the whole thing on my own, just because I felt it was a kind of valid way to make a record, as well as any way that I'd always done before.
How do you feel about the fact that there's a whole audience out there who may have bought Ark of a Diver who doesn't even know about Traffic or the Spencer Davis group?
I think that's great. That's okay. I mean, I hope that Ark of a Diver doesn't rest solely on the laurels of history. That certainly was not the intention. That's fine. In fact, in some ways, it's better.
Do you have any favorites from that time?
Yeah.
Do you ever listen to any of it?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You really
I do.
do?
Well, I mean, not particularly. Just kind of out of choice. Oh, what shall I listen to today? I think a bit of Traffic. No, I don't kind of do that. But I mean,
I didn't mean that you sit in your house and listen to
right.
yourself over and over again.
Right.
But I just meant in general. Do you find yourself ever?
Yes, I do, because I for quite a time now I've been working on the idea of putting together a best of Traffic, and Oh, I was listening to all the old Traffic stuff. I got it all on tape and was sorting out um, the wheat from the chaff a bit.
If you were to perform now, would you perform any songs from that period? Do
Yeah.
you
Oh,
think?
certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what?
I think there are certain ones that kind of stand out. The Dynasty of Fantasy and Heaven Was in Your Mind and Pearly Queen.
When Steve Winwood, Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch formed Blind Faith, it was hailed as a supergroup. After one record and one tour, the group suddenly broke up. I asked Steve what happened.
Really, what happened is I think the band didn't really have a chance to develop as a new band does. I mean, it started out in the usual way that any new band starts. We talked about the kind of thing we did, started to write some stuff, got the people to play in the band, went in the studio, and cut the album. So far, so good. It was, the album stands up fairly well these days as a kind of first album for a band. But the problems came when we went on the road, and I think a lot of people were wanting to hear kind of Cream, long jams. See, what happened is when we eventually came on stage, we realised that this is what everyone was wanting to hear, the long guitar solo and the long drum solo. And so there's a dilemma, because when you play in front of people, you want to make them feel that it was a good show. So you've got to give them, to a certain extent, what they want.
Do you mean Ginger Baker did not want to do a long drum solo?
I wouldn't go as far as to say that.
All right.
But and of course then it got very frustrating. The problems got very complicated, and arguments developed about what we should be doing and what should not be doing. And we were certainly, I suppose, to a certain extent, I feel, the guinea pigs of that era.
Did you, as you were quoted as saying, feel like a relic
Well,
of the 60s or whatever?
I suppose to a certain extent I am a relic of the 60s in a lot of people's eyes, I mean, the only thing you can do about it is to carve a niche for yourself in the 80s, that's all. But I mean, you can't erase what you've done or what you've been in the 60s.
But you've always thought of yourself as a musician. You're
Yeah.
a singer, you're a songwriter.
Yeah. I mean, I think that rock and roll is certainly more than music. Rock and roll is kind of a certain energy. It's involved with fashion, theatrics, and visuals. I'm not sure I can, define exactly, but there's no doubt about it. It's not just music. There's something else that makes rock and roll. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I feel that the areas that I'm able to work in is more confined to audio than say theatrics or visual arts.
What did you play, actually, on this record?
Well, I used the drum machine, but I play the drums as well,
Right.
and mix the two together. But basically keyboards. There's guitar on quite a bit of it. There's the bass parts are synthesizers, and I use a natural piano, a Hammond organ, and an upright bass. I mean, there's been fantastic developments with machines and synthesizers recently, but the thing that's often overlooked is that they don't really make anything any easier.
You mean it's just as hard as it would be to learn how to play the saxophone?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, it's certainly it's certainly no easier. If you couldn't play the keyboard and you couldn't play the saxophone, let's say, I mean, making a keyboard sound like a sax would be no easier at all than playing a saxophone. Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that.
After Ark of a Diver came out, you did a lot of interviews to promote that record, and you, at that time, were quoted as saying that you were definitely going to use a band for the next record. What happened? Why didn't you?
Well, I finished Ark of a Diver, and I thought, well, no way am I ever going to go through that again. It was a torturous experience that took so long, and so much energy, and I made so many mistakes, and I thought, well, the publishers and the record company were right. I should never have made an album like that. I was mad. I thought, well, that's it. Okay, I've done it. I've proved to myself that I can do it. Now I'll get back to working sensibly now. And then what happens is that the record suddenly becomes the most successful record I've ever made in my life. So, I had to really reconsider. So I felt that I must at least give it another shot, because I'd learnt a lot about that way of recording, and I could do it now with some kind of flow that I was struggling to do it at the beginning with Ark of Diving. And so, I felt that it was necessary to give it at least another shot.
Can we look forward to seeing you perform at all in this country, do you think, in the near future?
I think so. I'm putting together some live shows. I don't think it'll be an extended rock and roll tour, because I think I've had enough of that. But certainly some concerts I shall put a band together. I mean,
It'll be your band, yes? I mean, will they be like a backup band? Or will they play
well,
what you tell them to play?
let's put it this way: it won't be very democratic.